In this video, we're going to talk about vintage Nikon cameras using vintage Nikon lenses and modern day lenses. So stay tuned. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Ron Durant. I'm a photographer in East Tennessee. In this video, I want to talk to you about vintage camera bodies and vintage lenses from Nikon. Recently, I acquired a Nikon D70 body from a family member, and I cleaned it up. It had been sitting in a box for a long time, and I bought a new battery for it, and it fired right up. This is a 6 megapixel camera, and along with this camera body, I got a 50 millimeter AF 50 millimeter 1.8 lens. It is perfect. There's nothing wrong with it. It'll autofocus on this body. I also picked up with this camera a 70 to 210 push-pull zoom. You push and pull, not twist it. f4 to 5.6. So at 70 millimeters it's f4, and all the way out to 210 it's 5.6. This is also an AF model lens. It's in really good shape. This one here takes 62 millimeter filter threads, and the 50 millimeter takes a 52 millimeter filter thread. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this camera out and I'm going to do some photography with it. And along with those two lenses, those two vintage lenses, I have some modern day lenses I want to try. So the first one I'm going to try on this camera to see how it does is the Nikon AFS 12 to 24 f4 lens. This is a G lens. This is a crop sensor body. This is a crop sensor lens. Shouldn't be no problem at all. Okay, the AFS lenses will work with this body. In addition to that, I have a 200 to 500 Nikon f5.6 zoom lens, and I have a 500 millimeter Nikon PF f5.6 lens. I'm going to try both of those lenses out on this camera too. One thing I will tell you though is both of those lenses, the 200 to 500 and the 500 PF, are electronic aperture lenses. This camera will not control those apertures. So when you mount those lenses to this body or any of these vintage cameras, what you're going to get is the wide open aperture, which is 5.6 on these two lenses. That's okay by me because the majority of the time, in fact all of the time, I shoot at wide open apertures using those two lenses. So I'm not too concerned about that. But what I like to do is take some photographs with those lenses just to see what kind of wildlife images I can get out of this 6 megapixel Nikon D70. Real quick, I'm going to go over the prices of some stuff so you know you don't have to spend a lot of money to get into this game. Okay, these vintage cameras are excellent buys. They still have a lot of life to them, especially if you find one that was traded in and has a low shutter count and is really good shape. It's clean. Somebody might have bought it. It just sat around. They sold it. They didn't use it. Whatever. A D70 in good condition. I haven't been able to find any excellent conditions, but the good conditions on this camera at mpb.com is $52. Okay, that's a low shutter count, like about 9,000 shutter clicks, which is really good. Okay, you can get some other bodies that are a little bit better, and I'm going to cover those in another video. But one of the other ones that I'm looking at right now is the D200. Now, the D70, the specifications on that real quick. It's a 6 megapixel camera, and it's crop sensor. It was manufactured and released in late 2003 and 2004. When you bought this new, it cost almost $1,000. That was just for the body. It's an older CCD sensor. It's not a CMOS sensor. There is a lot of videos on YouTube about the CCD sensors, the things that people like about them. And one of the things I hear constantly from watching videos on YouTube is the picture quality from this is more like film. It doesn't have that sterile look to it. And I've taken quite a few pictures with this already, and we're going to review some of those in this video. But I'll tell you what, I am very pleased with the images that are coming out of this camera. You think about it for a minute. Most of the time we're posting to social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you name it, okay? This camera here will produce an image that's better than your phone to put on those social media pages. You can even print a print from this. I would say you could get a pretty good size print out of this. The file sizes on this, you know, being 6 megapixel, I would say you can get an 8 by 10 or 11 by 14 really nice out of this. Again, on the specs, the ISO range for this camera is from ISO 200, that's right, 200 to 1600. I have pushed the limits of the ISO. I will show that to you in some of the images just to see what kind of noise that this sensor produces. It will work with all AF, AFD, AFS, and those are all autofocus lenses. It will also work with an AI or AIS lens from back in the 1970s and 1980s. Basically, it will work with just about every lens that Nikon ever made, with some limitations for the electronic shutter, the E-mount lenses. So far I've only run into 3 of those lenses personally. One was, like I just told you, the 200 to 500, the 500 PF, and also the kit lens that came with the D500 was a 16 to 80, I believe. It was an E lens, but it was a f4 to 6.3, I believe. Well, it wanted to be at f4 all the time. Okay, I got rid of that lens and got something else to use instead of that. That lens was not going to be very useful for me. Anyways, we're going to go over some photographs. I'm going to go out and take some photographs. I'm going to take you on location. I'm fixing to leave in the morning very early to go over to the Smoky Mountains and stay over at Cades Cove. And I'm going to try to do some landscape photography with this camera. And I'm also going to do some wildlife photography with this camera, with one of those 2 lenses, the 200 to 500 or the 500 PF. So listen, stay tuned to the rest of this video and you'll be able to see the images that I was able to produce from this D70. And if you got any comments or anything, you want to talk about some stuff, you want me to try some things, I'll be able to try some things if you want me to. Just leave me a comment below and I will try to answer your questions directly and see if we can't help you decide whether you want to buy a very expensive brand new camera or do you want to invest in a vintage, almost new camera. We are on location here in Cades Cove in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And I'm set up with the D70 right now, and I have a composition I'm working on, a landscape composition. And I'm using the 12 to 24 f4 lens, DX lens on this camera right now. And I'm just taking a few shots right here. This is f11 at 1/250th of a second, and I've got the ISO at 400. And we're going to take a couple of shots, and then what we'll do is we'll take these and compare those in the computer with some of the other shots I'm going to do. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to switch over to the 50mm 1.8 and take a few shots with that. This is the AF 50mm 1.8. Of course, that 12 to 24 was at 24 millimeters. Anyways, ouch, that hurt. This is a 50mm shot, same settings. It says it's a little bit underexposed, so I think I better increase the ISO just a bit. I'm gonna go to ISO 640. The sun keeps coming in and out over there, so I'm gonna readjust this just a little bit to get this mountain in there. So it's the same exposure settings, 1/250th of a second shutter, f11, but this is ISO 640. Those previous shots were ISO 400. Okay, so we brought the Z6 II out and we got the 24-70 on it. And of course it's a full frame, so it doesn't match up to the crop sensor. I'm set at the same, almost the same exposure settings, 1/250th f11 at ISO 320, and it's about 2/3 of a stop underexposed. But now we're going to change this lens to about 35 millimeters. Let's see, 12, let's see, that was 24 millimeters. Half of that would be 36. So this would be equivalent, I believe, to the 12-24. And I'm gonna have to increase my ISO now. The sun keeps playing around with me over there. So we're gonna go to ISO 500. Still 1/250th of a second f11. I wanna compare these files, okay? And anyway, that's gonna be a pretty good shot right there. Okay, so we'll look at those in the computer right now and kind of compare those shots and get an idea, any big differences. I did bring the Z6 II out, and I wanted to do some comparison shots of this composition so you could see those on the screen. And you could judge for yourself the quality between the two camera bodies. So we are on Sparks Lane. It's one of the gravel roads that cross over from one side to the other. It's a two-way road. But there's some pretty good landscape compositions available down here. Just kind of drive around and look a little bit, see what you can find. Pulled off the side of the road here and to reframe this mountain. I'm back on the D70 now with the 50 millimeter. I'm gonna leave the exposure as it is. It's 1/250th of a second f11, and the ISO is sitting at 640, which is fine. I've done some testing with this, but we'll see how well it handles the noise. Let me get my tripod level here. The sun keeps dancing in and out of clouds. Trying to get something unique. It's kind of weird with these focus points because you're limited to the amount of focus points you have compared to the newer cameras, like the mirrorless ones. This one here, I've got, looks like 5 in a group. This display on the back is terrible, and there's no electronic viewfinder on it, so you got to totally trust the histogram on this camera to tell if you've got a good photograph. That's why this camera is so much like having a film camera. You can't see your pictures when you're doing film camera, so you know, with this one right here, it's like a film camera. You know, you can't see what your picture is going to look like till you get it developed. Well, the screen on this is not the greatest in the world on the back. It does give you a representation, but it does show you the histogram, which is important, that you know how to read a histogram. So I'm going to switch to the 12-24 real quick while I got this composition set up. There's no filters on the front of these lenses. So now we have the 12-24, and we will be at 24 millimeters because that's as wide, that's as narrow as I can get it. Looks like the same settings. Yes, I'm gonna do a 24 millimeter shot with this 12-24 AFS f4 lens. Anyways, we did a couple shots right there, and we're going to look at those in the computer and compare those. I have had a lot of camera bodies in my lifetime. Being able to use this older Nikon D70 for some of my photographs has been very enjoyable. I have found an interest in older camera gear, and especially older Nikon glass. Some of the best lenses that Nikon ever produced were coming out of the 1970s and 1980s, are still available on the used market.
You should really investigate that and check on these used bodies and see if that would be something you would be interested in doing. And I want to leave you with this final shot right here. This one was actually shot with a Nikon D200. I had mounted my Nikon 200 to 500 f5.6 lens onto this D200 body. I was just playing around with it to see what kind of quality I could get from it. In this particular photograph, it has had topaz denoise and sharpen AI applied to it with some typical Lightroom corrections that I normally do. But as you can see from the sensor, the D200 sensor, this one is, that the quality of this photograph is very good, at least good enough for social media.
Well, I believe that's going to do it for the testing I'm going to do on the D70. I think from the photographs you just seen, you got a pretty good idea if this might be a camera you would consider. They can be purchased used from different sources. I happened to get mine for free, so I didn't have to buy it. But I did do some checking. And on MPB, they go from there from $50 to $100, low shutter counts, 9,000 clicks, 10,000 clicks. The 12 to 24 lens, the 12 to 24 DX f4 is what I was using today. I've used that lens for a long time. I've used it on my D70 500, my D70 200, my D500. Now I'm using it on the D70. It's a very sharp lens. It's a nice landscape lens, does really well with waterfall photography, things like that. It's wide angle, 12 to 24, which is, what is that, 18 to 36 full frame equivalent. And also with this camera, I got the 50mm 1.8 and a 70 to 210 push-pull zoom. I didn't use the 70 to 210 today. I did use the 50mm, and we showed some of those shots too. So I hope you found this video useful. My name is Ron Durant. I live in East Tennessee. I'm a photographer. Thank you all for coming by today. We'll see you in the next one. Bye now.